You know that feeling? Just information overload, news, social media. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's relentless.
Right. And what you really want is just clarity, someone to sort through it and give you the key insights.
Exactly. The stuff that actually matters.
Well, that's what we do here on The Deep Dive. We try to be that shortcut for you, cutting through the noise.
And today, we've got quite a stack in front of us. We're digging into the first 100 days of a potential second Trump term.
Yeah, based on a whole collection of reports and commentaries.
As a really interesting mix, we've got think tanks like CEI, Heritage, then news outlets Daily Caller, Fox, Daily Wire.
And even a Reddit discussion, which adds a different kind of flavor.
For sure. Gives you that unfiltered reaction sometimes.
So our mission today, unpack the big policy shifts, the reactions, the buzz from this initial period. Give you a clear map without getting you lost in the weeds.
Sounds good. Where should we start? There's a lot here.
Maybe with the whole structure of government itself, regulations, bureaucracy. That seems to pop up a lot.
Yeah, that's a huge theme. CEI, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, talks about the Costberg of federal regulation.
Costberg, like an iceberg, but for costs?
Exactly. Most of the economic burden is hidden, unseen. And they also mention regulatory dark matter.
Okay, dark matter. What's that in government terms?
It's things like agency guidance, interpretations, stuff that acts like law but hasn't gone through Congress. Yeah.
Gotcha. So shatter rules with real impact. And how are they tackling this, according to the sources?
Well, the Daily Caller highlights the creation of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
DOGE, okay. What's its job?
Basically, find waste, modernize government operations. Apparently, Elon Musk was even involved in some capacity based on the reporting.
Interesting. But what about results? Are there actual savings mentioned?
Well, they claim billions in potential savings and better efficiency. The Daily Caller and others definitely push that angle.
They push it, but are the details, like, spelled out? How they'd save the billions?
Not always in granular detail, no. But the emphasis is clearly there. It's presented as a top priority.
Okay. And besides DOGE, what else?
A lot of executive orders.
Yeah.
Over 140, according to several sources like CEI and Fox News. Mostly aimed at deregulation, rolling back previous policies.
Over 140 EOs in 100 days. That's aggressive.
It certainly signals intent. The goal seems to be shrinking the size and reach of federal agencies.
Right. CEI mentioned a specific one, EO 14219, as a sign they want to start dismantling parts of the administrative state.
Yeah, that's how they interpret it. Heritage reminds us there were deregulation pushes in the first term too, but this sounds maybe more focused, more assertive.
How does this stack up against, say, the Biden administration's approach?
It's pretty much the opposite, according to CEI. They point out Biden leaned towards more whole-of-government mandates, maybe less focus on strict cost-benefit analysis for regulations.
So this is a clear swing back. Any specific areas mentioned for deregulation?
Energy efficiency mandates come up as one example. Definitely a rollback in that area.
Okay. Let's shift gears. Another massive topic in these first 100 days. Border security and immigration.
Oh, absolutely. Front and center in almost every source that touches on it, and framed as a major success.
Success how? What are the claims?
Well, the Daily Wire actually uses the phrase sealed the border. They cite a 99.9% drop in illegal immigration.
99.9%. That sounds almost unbelievable. Do other sources back that up?
The exact numbers vary a bit. We see 98%, 93%, 85% drops mentioned elsewhere, like the Daily Caller and Fox News, depending on the time frame.
So maybe not 99.9 everywhere, but still huge reported drops across the board.
The consistent message is a very significant reduction in illegal border encounters.
How are they measuring that, though? Is it just encounters, or and could other factors be involved?
That's a fair question. The sources mostly attribute the drops directly to the policy changes. They don't tend to explore other potential factors much.
Okay, so what are the key policies they credit?
Signing the Lake and Riley Act is mentioned by several, like the Daily Caller and Fox.
Right. That got a lot of attention. What else?
Ending catch and release, bringing back Remain in Mexico. Those are big ones.
Okay, re-implementing Remain in Mexico. And suspending the refugee admissions program, too.
Yes, that's reported, along with halting flights from specific countries.
And what about that CBP app? I remember that being used for appointments.
Right, CBP-1. Well, according to the Daily Wire and Washington Times, it's been rebranded as CBP Home.
CBP Home. And the purpose now?
Reportedly, it's for facilitating self-deportations. So instead of booking an asylum appointment, People might use it to register their intent to leave.
Wow, that's quite a flip.
It is. And they also mentioned a big international ad campaign trying to deter people from coming illegally in the first place.
It sounds like it goes beyond just the U.S. border, too.
Definitely. The Daily Caller mentions agreements with El Salvador about returning gang members.
And designating cartels as terrorists.
Yeah, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, named as foreign terrorist organizations in multiple reports. Plus, using tariffs as leverage on Canada and Mexico over border issues.
Tariffs as leverage. What about longer-term goals? Things like birthright citizenship.
That's being discussed, according to Fox News, along with possibly cutting DOJ funding for sanctuary jurisdictions.
And the Guantanamo Bay reports, using it for illegal alien detention.
The Daily Signal reported on that, yes. Reopening it for that purpose. It's definitely one of the more striking proposals mentioned.
And an EO to keep federal benefits just for citizens.
That's mentioned too. And an overall increase in deportations of those already inside the country illegally.
Okay, quite a package on immigration. Let's move to social issues. Seems like another area with very distinct actions.
Very distinct. The formal recognition of only male and female as sexes is highlighted by the Daily Caller and others.
And tied to that, funding cuts.
Reportedly, yes. Eliminating federal money for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, and what the sources call gender ideology in K-12 schools.
DEI funding cut, and also a ban on transgender athletes in women's sports.
That's reported by the Daily Wire, Fox News, yeah. These are definite signals on cultural flashpoints.
What's the reasoning given in the sources for these changes?
Generally, it's framed as returning to common sense, pushing back against ideological agendas. The argument is federal money should be for core education, not DEI, and that the sports ban is about fairness for biological women.
And the potential impacts they talk about.
A return to, quote, traditional values protecting women's sports. That's the narrative.
And this goes beyond schools and sports.
Oh, yeah. Reports of a government-wide DEI ban, stopping federal funds for gender transitions for minors, enforcing the Hyde Amendment more strictly.
Universities, too. Columbia and Harvard funding freezes.
Yes, linked to accusations of not stopping illegal DEI or issues around anti-Semitism and compliance. It shows a willingness to use funding as leverage there. It's really direct intervention in some very hot-button areas, isn't it?
Seems like it. The reported pardons for pro-life protesters and January 6th individuals.
And the stated goal of ending perceived anti-Christian bias, promoting a specific view of American history. It all points to a deliberate cultural push from the top.
We also see mentions of changing public service loan forgiveness.
Ending COVID vaccine mandates in schools, going back to merit-based hiring at the FAA, adds to that picture.
Okay, how about national defense and security? What's the focus there?
Boosting military recruitment seems key. The Daily Caller mentions efforts, and Fox News reports a supposed resurgence in Army, Navy, Air Force numbers.
More than just numbers, though.
Right. There are reports of revoking security clearances for people accused of weaponizing government, and EO specifically against anti-Semitism.
And within the military itself.
The focus is described as being on merit, lethality, and reinstating service members kicked out over the COVID vaccine mandate.
Any specific actions against foreign groups?
The Houthis being designated as a foreign terrorist organization is mentioned by several sources.
And funding cuts.
Yeah, halting funds to NGOs seen as undermining U.S. interests. And starting the process to withdraw from the World Health Organization. That WHO withdrawal is interesting. How does that connect to broader foreign policy?
Well, connecting to that, there's an emphasis on foreign military sales. The F-16 deal for the Philippines and Taiwan is cited as an example.
And appointments. Any patterns there?
Appointing people linked to the Heritage Foundation into national security roles is noted. Plus, trying to modernize defense purchasing.
Right. Okay, so turning fully to foreign policy, what are the highlights?
The Daily Caller mentions securing American hostages early on as a win.
And restructuring foreign aid seems significant.
Yeah, reports of eliminating U.S. aid entirely and trying to de-radicalize foreign aid distribution. That sounds like a major overhaul.
Definitely. What else stands out?
The reported capture of the person behind the Abbey-Gate attack. Lots of meetings with foreign leaders at the White House. Proposed critical minerals deal with Ukraine.
Minerals with Ukraine. Any other specific countries?
Mention of addressing human rights in South Africa, and then some more ambitious ideas.
Ambitious how?
Like potentially acquiring Greenland or the Panama Canal.
Greenland again, and the canal.
Okay. And pressuring Panama to leave China's Belt and Road Initiative.
So push back against China there. What about Iran?
Restoring maximum pressure is the term used. Also, tariffs on China over synthetic opioids.
More tariffs? and controls on Chinese investment.
Yeah, using CFI-US, the Committee on Foreign Investment, more strictly.
And NATO.
Pressure on allies to up their defense spending, and this idea of a one-voice policy for foreign relations, trying to keep everyone on the same message.
Okay, let's briefly touch on economy and trade. What are the key points?
Sources mention inflation easing a bit back in February, an investment accelerator initiative, modernizing how the government makes payments.
Trade deals.
Pursuing fair trade deals is mentioned, potential action against Meta over monopoly concerns, more investment in chips and AI, and some regulatory relief for coal.
Coal relief ties into energy policy, I assume. What's happening there?
Big shifts reported. Reconsidering the EPA's finding that greenhouse gases endanger public health.
That's fundamental. Wow.
Yeah. Announcing dozens of deregulatory environmental actions, targeting power plant rules, rescinding EV mandates, and the social cost of carbon calculation.
So a major rollback of climate-related regulations.
Seems so. An EO to boost U.S. energy and mineral production. Withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement again, declaring a national energy emergency.
An energy emergency. What else?
Water relief for Southern California, removing federal funds for EV charging stations, pausing and reviewing subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act, and, again, specific relief for the coal industry.
A very clear direction on energy. What about education?
Well, the big headline reported is an executive order aiming to eventually end the Federal Department of Education.
End it entirely and return powers to the states.
That's the stated goal, yes. Along with cutting its workforce and expanding school choice in places the federal government has jurisdiction.
And the university funding freezes we mentioned earlier fit here too.
Exactly, tying funding to compliance on issues like anti-Semitism and anti-discrimination laws.
Okay. Rule of law, justice system. Any key moves?
Heritage looks back at the first term conservative judges like Gorsuch empowering immigration officers.
And for a potential second term.
Reports of an order to enforce a specific federal rule, Rule 65C, more strictly to reduce lawsuits deemed frivolous.
Anything else?
Stated plans to hold government officials accountable for alleged election interference.
Okay. And tech policy. Anything specific there?
An FTC investigation into alleged big tech censorship is mentioned, and an executive order promoting AI development, but specifically free from ideological bias.
AI free from bias. Interesting phrasing. We're covering a lot of ground here. Any other notable actions?
Quite a few miscellaneous ones listed across the sources. Opening the White House press pool to new media, terminating contracts with outlets labeled fake news.
Changing the media landscape there.
Ordering declassification of JFK, RFK, MLK assassination files, pushing for stricter voter ID and citizenship enforcement.
Health gap.
An order for radical price transparency. Establishing a Make America Healthy Again commission, reviewing FEMA.
And symbolic stuff.
Restoring original names to military bases and landmarks. Proposing renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Gulf of America, okay.
Mandating beautiful architecture for federal buildings. Ordering federal employees back to in-person work. And a general instruction for the government to respect free speech.
Wow. That's a whirlwind of activity reported in just 100 days.
It really is. Now, there was one specific policy proposal that seemed to spark a lot of debate, especially on that Reddit thread we saw. The idea of eliminating federal taxes on overtime pay.
Yes. That one definitely caught people's attention. On the surface, it sounds pretty good for workers, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Keep more of your overtime earnings. Seems like a straightforward win for the working class.
And that's how some commentary presents it. But the Reddit discussion, pulling from concerns about Project 2025, raised a really sharp counterpoint.
Which was?
The worry isn't just about the tax on overtime. It's about whether the requirement to pay overtime at all might be eliminated or drastically changed.
Ah, I see. So you might not pay tax on overtime because you might not get overtime pay anymore.
That's the concern being voiced, that it's potentially an empty promise or worse, a way to undermine the Fair Labor Standards Act and the NLRB.
Like a Trojan horse kind of policy.
Potentially. The discussion referenced the Bush administration's changes to overtime rules as a historical parallel. It highlights how complex these things can be.
It really does. What sounds simple up front might have much deeper implications for workers' rights.
Exactly. It's a good example of needing to look beyond the headline.
Okay, one last area. How did our sources describe the Democratic Party's reaction to all of this?
Pretty uniformly negative, at least in the sources we looked at, like the Daily Caller. They're generally portrayed as opposing almost everything.
Opposing what, specifically?
Accused of supporting open borders, resisting cuts to government waste like DOGE, fighting the regulatory reforms, basically opposing the entire agenda.
And the overall portrayal.
The narrative in these particular sources is often that the Democrats are kind of unraveling, out of touch with common sense, clinging to unpopular ideas.
So a very critical perspective on the opposition's response.
Very much so.
All right. So, wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear these first 100 days, whether actual or projected, outline some really significant potential shifts.
Absolutely. Across the board, government structure, borders, social issues, defense, foreign policy, economy, major moves outlined.
And as we've discussed, nearly every action comes with controversy and debate, doesn't it?
Definitely. Big questions about the role of government, border strategies, labor laws, fundamental disagreements are really highlighted.
So here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Looking at all these reported actions and proposals, which ones strike you as having the most potential for long-lasting impact on the country?
And maybe consider what the fierce debates around these policies reveal about the core differences in governing philosophies that are really shaping things today.
Yeah. Hopefully this dive gave you some solid ground to start thinking about those bigger questions. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring.